The wheels of the train beat out a lulling and soothing rhythm. With every kilometer, the past life faded away and the passengers were transported to an exciting future. Traveling leaves few people indifferent, and his age is of no importance here. Konstantin Petrovich sighed. The train became noisy. It was getting dark outside the windows, and everything told him that something extraordinary was about to happen. Experience already told him what to expect. But my mind stubbornly refused to listen. We need immediate help. Is there a doctor on board? The conductor's voice inexorably approached his compartment, and the man sighed. It was not his style to hide his profession and refuse help. He just wanted to spend a little more time in the sweet anticipation of rest, even if it was not quite ordinary. He shook his head and pushed the door open. "I'm a doctor, what's wrong?" A minute later he was pacing the carriage, carrying his standard first aid kit. Wherever he went, he always took a small case with him. It often came in handy. A young girl needed help. Judging by her appearance, she was about 25 years old. Her water had just broken, and the baby was about to be born. The conductor had time to tell her all she knew on the way. 2 weeks before the due date set by the doctors. The patient took a risk and went to her hometown, thinking she would be back in time. But the baby had plans of his own. Konstantin looked at the twisted face and was surprised. "Is that you?" "I didn't expect that, Nastya. I remember you well, don't I?" Small world. It really turned out to be Anastasia, an aspiring journalist of the capital's news. About a year ago she was in her hospital and interviewed him. It was hard to forget. That day everything had gone wrong. First he had been taken out of the operating room and the patient had been given to another surgeon. Only the chief surgeon, who was also his wife's father, could afford such freedom. He was more of a manager than a doctor, so his concern for the prestige and rating of the institution came first. Ivan Ivanovich, who was authoritative and accustomed to obedience, did not like to be crossed, and Konstantin did not like to be led. The fierce argument about the interview turned into a regular quarrel. It happened so often, but it was still hard to get used to. The father-in-law managed to remember the past, because Kostya should be grateful to him for what he has and for his place in this clinic, among other things. Surgeons, a lot. But such elite medical institutions can be counted on the fingers of one hand. Petrovich twitched. Nothing changes over the years, and why did he accept this offer then? Memory opened the pages of the past. Then he was only a graduate, received a place on the distribution. Neither he nor his mother, who raised him alone, had any special connections, so there was no point in applying for a place in the city hospital. Everything was reserved in advance for the children of rich and influential parents. He was ready for any adventure. And then the offer came. The position sounded good. Assistant surgeon. A young specialist was welcome, and there was a shortage of hands. But nothing interrupted the oppressive longing, not even the fact that Lena, like him, had met. The girl came here through the distribution, but a year earlier. The romance turned quickly. Kostya realized that he was expected to propose, and he was not against it. But then life decided to test his strength, and he did not pass the test. A friend's call sounded like a bell, and Lyanka, choking, confessed that his father was opening a clinic and hiring staff, and he liked Kostya's candidacy, especially since he put in a good word for Rita. At the mention of her, the young surgeon wrinkled his nose. She paid attention, but she was a total bitch. Good looks mixed with bitchiness. The girl was eager to humiliate anyone who didn't worship her. An exception was made for Bones. He would think about it then, but he only heard about returning to the capital and the vacancy. Farewell to Lena came out crumpled. He just promised to go away for a while. Here we'll solve all the cases and take them out of this remote province, and then he was twisted. The clinic turned out to be ultramodern. Money at the father of a friend was enough. Konstantin was so fascinated by the new equipment in modern tools and ways to help that he did not notice how he got used to it. It was not difficult for him to keep everything he had got, just to marry Margarita. He was too young to look far into the future and too reckless to decide that he could get a divorce later. But his love for his work never allowed him to do so. One thing was happy, although it was sad to realize, but in their family life there was no other deterrent. At first the wife did not want children. Later it turned out that this was no longer possible, however bitter it may sound, but at least there were no children who would suffer from seeing the scandals of their parents, and these happened regularly. That he remembered her interview for one reason: his trained eye immediately noticed that the young girl was just beginning her career. To help the journalist, Konstantin Petrovich gave her a little tour of the wards. Although, as a doctor, he was always against outsiders in the clinic. And now she needs his help again, but the situation has changed a bit. And who gave you permission to go on the road at this stage? How did your husband allow such a thing? And he did not allow, writhing in pain whispered Nastia. I myself decided to visit my mother. And I thought I would have time, and it was not so long to go. Anastasia named the city where Konstantin Petrovich himself was going. Another scandal with her father-in-law had crossed all boundaries. The chief physician regularly threw phrases that if there are claims, let him put the application on the table constantly triggered. The father-in-law, well knew how he likes to take his work and patience, but this time something went wrong. Petrovich slammed the door and returned a few minutes later with a piece of paper. Here you go. Here is my statement, I hope you will stop bothering me now. While the head doctor was still digesting his words, Konstantin was already on his way through the corridors he knew so well. Strangely, he felt so relieved, as if someone had lightly lifted a multi-ton weight from his shoulders. At home, Rita was already preparing for the meeting after hearing from her father about what had happened. You're out of your mind. Have you forgotten to whom you owe what? If it hadn't been for us, if it hadn't been for my father. The woman even turned away in anger, and he calmly packed a suitcase, only the most necessary, the rest later. Now just to leave, not to see her face. I'll file for divorce myself. Goodbye. Then the idea was born to visit this very city. Too often it was mentioned by his wife and father-in-law. They said they had pulled him out of such a hole. The tickets were only for the morning, and he spent the night in the station hotels. He woke up cheerful. He himself was surprised at such a rise in spirits. Did they really push him so hard that their absence changed everything so much? And now he's helping to bring a new person into the world. That's so exciting and important. The boy was born healthy. A really big boy. During the standard procedure, the surgeon suddenly froze. He could not believe his eyes. What he saw was simply impossible. The coincidence was too improbable. There was a rather large star-shaped birthmark on the baby's right shoulder. That would be fine, but it was the exact same one in the same place on his own. His mother had once said that it was a peculiarity of the men in her family. The women are unmarked, but the men have all had this special mark for generations. How could this little boy have it? Nastia, tell me, where were you born in this town, or where did you come from? The woman was not troubled by the questions. Overjoyed at the birth of her son, Nastia said that this town was her hometown. She was born and raised here, but she doesn't know anything about her father. No matter how she asked her mother, she always avoided direct answers. She raised her alone and worked in the local hospital all her life. Now she is not only a doctor, but the head of the hospital. Nastia spoke proudly about her mother. That's why she decided to go to her. She knew that her mother would help her. But she didn't expect such a turn. Under the pretext of professional ethics, Konstantin Petrovich asked the name of a good doctor, although he already knew what answer he would get. Lena remained Konovalova, but now she was called by her patronymic with respect and reverence, Elena Semyonovna. She helped many people. She was kind and attentive to everyone. The townspeople simply adored her, and so did her daughter. Nastia said a lot of other things, but the surgeon couldn't think clearly. Now he had to decide what to do, and he threw himself headlong into the maelstrom. Nastia, I'm sorry, I understand if you send me away now, but I can't tell you, and he told everything in a spirit. And about the birthmark, and about his first love, which had ended so ridiculously because of his stupidity, and about how hard the years of his own life had been. Only now did he realize how wrong he had been. The mere memory of Helen filled him with longing. And the famous doctor realized that he had never stopped loving her. Silenced the memory of the work, reassured by the fact that he dedicated the fate of the profession. Although, of course, if only he knew about the existence of his daughter. Anastasia was silent. He could not blame her. It was hard to find out who her father was after so many years. Constantine was almost certain that he would be sent away, but a faint hope did not leave him. You know, it's not my place to judge anyone. I won't hide it, the news has knocked me down a bit, but to decide in haste is not the right idea. Anyway, that's what my mother always taught me, let her decide. The doctor could only be happy that there was a chance. An ambulance was waiting on the platform. The baby and Nastya was taken to the hospital, but Constantine did not go. He had to come to himself, decided to settle down in the hotel and look after Anastasia a little later, and at the same time put his thoughts and feelings in order. He walked leisurely along the quiet streets and marveled at the peace that reigned inside. Despite all the turmoil and what had happened, the city had a calming effect. It had changed considerably over the years from a small provincial town, but the leisurely pace remained in the shop. To his surprise, there was a good selection, and Constantine bought a bunch of gifts for the newborn baby, his grandson. Who was his grandson? He found a huge bouquet for Nastya and bought another one without hoping for anything. Many things had changed in the hospital, too. Everything was more modern and better maintained. A new building had been built, a small one, but with new equipment, and the staff had grown. Nurses rushed here and there. The reception desk was crowded, and Nastya was glad to see him. Her husband had already rushed to her and scolded her for such reckless behavior. His wife had told him about her father, and now Victor looked with interest at the shy Constantine standing on the threshold. The awkward pause lasted a few moments. "Thank you for coming on time and helping us with the birth of our son." A minute later the door to the room opened. Elena had come to see her daughter, and for the first time that day she wasn't happy about her grandson. Nastya told her what had happened on the train. Sooner or later they would meet. The universe stopped time while these two, afraid to breathe, looked at each other. Each of them was thinking and remembering, about something different, but the emotions were similar. Constantine never returned to the capital. No, he went to get his things, finish the divorce and put things in order. To all the nags of the former he reacted so calmly that Rita was covered with spots. The usual tweaks did not work, she could not hook him in any way. There was no other way. He simply did not hear her, hurried, did not want to stay 1 minute longer than the business required. A real and sincere warm home with his favorite wife and daughter was waiting for him. Nikita was waiting for him. His grandson was a very special event that turned his consciousness upside down. He was ready to do anything for her. Waiting was a quiet city with a leisurely life and green shady streets. Morning coffee on the terrace, Lena's smiling eyes, they would get together and rush to work to patients and the eternally dissatisfied nurse and a whole lot of paperwork. But nothing could please me more than this daily hustle and bustle and everyday life. Ordinary life with the people you love.